So how distant of cousins do you have to be before it's okay? That's where we are in this next installment. Hi, hello, ¿cómo estás? Welcome to my channel. I am Jan, and we are here to discuss books and nostalgia. This book picks up shortly after the events of One False Note, with our heroes having found the first two clues, iron solute and tungsten. Their next clue used swords to hint at the next location, which is in Japan, where they were originally forged. At this point, they have survived several explosions and other assassination attempts by their relatives. And despite this, Dan and Amy may have no choice but to trust those same relatives. So Dan and Amy are headed to Tokyo on a flight from Italy to Japan. Remember, the previous book left off with them in Venice. While boarding their plane, a flight attendant pulls them aside for a random check. They brought the swords on the plane, and now they're worried that's what this is about. Two people in trench coats bail past and board the flight just minutes before Dan and Amy could board. Natalie and Ian Cabral use fake boarding passes to take their place on the flight. So now, Nellie is stuck on a plane with the Cabrals. Amy gets so flustered and frustrated thinking about how Dan and her lack family to support them through this situation. The Cabrals, the Holts, the Wizards, she realizes how truly alone and helpless her and Dan are. When they try to find the flight attendant, they find her being escorted out on a stretcher, and cousin Irina Spassky wearing her uniform. It's like everywhere they go, they keep running into these other Cahills. Before they can plan their next move, an alarm blares and orders everyone to evacuate the airport. When they get outside, a limo pulls up and allows them inside. The driver is taking them to a smaller nearby airport, and in the backseat with them is Uncle Alistair O. He makes a deal with them, transportation in exchange for the location of their next clue search. Amy agrees, telling him Japan. Uncle O then tells them to attach GPS devices to their cell phones. Because there's so many different authors writing these, there's little inconsistencies in the books. The Cahills suddenly have phones, even though they never made an appearance in the previous books. On the plane with Nellie and the Cabrals, Ian and Natalie are questioning Nellie as to why they are going to Japan. When she refuses to answer, Natalie pours an unknown liquid into Nellie's soda when she is distracted. She initially planned to pour only a few drops but poured most of the contents of the container, and she doesn't hint us as to what the effects of it could be. Back with our orphans, they overhear Alistair on the phone with Irina. He tells her the truth, thinking it would have her paranoid mind thinking otherwise. He failed to consider that Irina wouldn't trust anyone, not even Alistair. She has been tailing their signal the whole time, her years of KGB training and experience making her very aware of betrayal as well as paranoid. In Tokyo, Dan and Amy are staying at a hotel with Uncle Alistair O. They're going to visit the Metropolitan Library in Tokyo, but Dan wants to go look for Nellie and Saladin ASAP. We find out Irina was led on a wild goose chase, the people she followed being the plane driver Sergei and his two children in disguise. At the library, Alistair tells him about his suspicions that the next clue lies with Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a samurai from the 16th century. He was a member of the Tomas branch and has descendants protecting his secrets, descendants who are Yakuza. Before going any further, they noticed one of the computers they were using was being hacked and wonder who could it be. They don't have to wonder long as the Holts barge in and capture them. The Holts take them in their van with them. Meanwhile, Amy gets a phone call from Nellie but doesn't answer it in the van. She doesn't want the Holts to overhear anything. While driving, Eisenhower tells him all the details of how they outsmarted Dan and Amy, hacking their tracking devices, tailing them, hacking the library computers. It was actually Reagan that did all this, his daughter, but he doesn't mention that. Eisenhower even goes on about how he wants to fix the Holt family name so they're not an embarrassment to the Tomas branch.
You sly dog! You got me monologuing! I can't.
When they bring up how they know the tunnels are where Alistair is really looking for, Dan can't help but bring up how he noticed that the subway maps he was looking at matched the secret tunnel map that Alistair had. The Holts, Alistair, Amy, and Dan agree to search the subway system for the secret crypt of Hideyoshi. The Holts may be an unhealthy family dynamic, But the marriage between Eisenhower and Mary Todd is rock solid, baby. Shout out to a supportive and loving couple. So in the subway system, they all begin searching for the clue. Dan is reminded of their many close calls underground and misses the photo of his parents that he lost. This poor boy. Before long, a train begins approaching quickly though. While fleeing, Amy gets her foot stuck under one of the railings and Dan goes back to try and help her. The Holtz bolt, leaving them to face the threat alone. Dan isn't able to free Amy, and at the last second, both are saved by Alistair O, who had found the secret passage Dan was talking about. They discover the secret room, there housing various objects and a clue in the form of a haiku talking about geometry. They take several pieces, believing them to be part of the clue, and leave to flee police and Yakuza. They find a ladder leading to the surface and begin to climb. Alistair is able to take out a Yakuza member who is about to attack him with a knife. As they climb out, their pursuers try to climb up after them. Alistair hits the first two attempts with his cane, causing them to snowball and all of them to fall back down. Amy, now slightly injured, is offered a piggyback from Alistair so they can get away. He also has Dan ditch the objects in a nearby alley, promising them they can pick it up later. They turn a corner and Alistair and Amy scarcely avoid being hit by a cab full of more Yakuza. They throw shuriken at our heroes, barely missing them as they attempt to get away. They're only saved by someone in a red Porsche. They cause the Yakuza to crash into a flower shop. The Yakuza run away in fear. Dan and Amy wonder who it could be, but they don't need to do so for long, as the Porsche lets out Saladin, and Nelly Gomez appears as well. They ask her a bunch of questions, like how she got a Porsche. The answer comes walking out of it, Ian and Natalie Cabral. They rush Amy, Dan, and Alistair into the car before any more Yakuza can show up. Only then can Nellie explain how she wound up working with the Cabrals. Back on the flight, after Natalie fumbled the poisoning of Nellie by both spilling too much and being easily caught in Nellie's line of sight, Nellie splashed it in their faces, and when they tried to reach for their overhead bag for the antidote, Nellie scooped it up. She was nice enough to give them the antidote, but made them promise to give her all their money. Remember, we gotta keep this trip financed. I like to think Nellie is just such a skilled babysitter that she can handle anyone younger than her, and would still treat them with kindness and respect as people. Like her skill is babysitter, and that entails all that comes
She's
with
an
it.
icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. Now come on
There's a
now.
romantic scene between Ian and Amy,
Oh, you nasty.
and then Ian mentions they should form a temporary alliance. They also mention having an artifact that may prove invaluable. They show Dan and Amy as they stop to retrieve the object stashed earlier in the alley. As they're opening them to check their contents, Alistair sees an old man with long white hair across the street and mumbles something under his breath. Dan believes it's something along the lines of "bye." While searching, they turn up nothing except for a scroll bearing a passage in Japanese that reads, "In the place of the final conquest, between three horns, lies the people's wealth, and by the elements united is entrance granted, the highest to be revealed." They also find a clue that looks like English letters, Toota. Alistair is able to piece together what the hint place of the final conquest means. He tells them it's where Hideyoshi suffered his greatest defeat after waging a final campaign. They're going to his home, Korea. On the flight to South Korea, we the audience learn that the old man Alistair saw was his uncle, Bai-o. It is revealed to us that his father was assassinated at the behest of his uncle, and for a mere $5,000. Apparently, the twin brothers didn't get along too well. Bai was jealous of his brother Gordon's success, and his uncle wound up being the one who raised Alistair in the end. Alistair also thinks about the promise he made to Arthur and Hope Cahill, Dan and Amy's parents. He relates to them, having lost his parents to the clues as well. They arrive in South Korea, at Alistair's mansion, which doesn't impress the Cabrals at all. There's more gross flirting from Amy and Ian, like, girl, don't you have any self-respect? Didn't nobody raise you better?
She don't love herself.
When Ian gets chased out of the hedge maze by a dog, Alistair shows them what lies at its center. A door in the ground which, when opened, reveals the O family sanctum. We get more of Ian unknowingly falling for Amy. He keeps questioning his feelings of love that he's never felt before.
No. Well,
We learn a little about the original Cahills, the parents of Luke, Thomas, Catherine, and Jane, Gideon, and Olivia Cahill. They lived in Dublin, Ireland in the 1500s. Gideon studied alchemy, specifically the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. Amy deduces that this is what the clues must add up to, and that the symbol for it matches the coin Ian and Natalie showed them. The 39 clues must be some kind of ultimate power. He also mentions that Thomas Cahill was a father of Hideyoshi, which is not actually true. I've looked up Hideyoshi's life, and we know who his father is. As they uncovered more, Alistair realizes he knows where to check for the next clue. The next morning, they drive through Seoul, where Alistair tells them the three horns refers to the three mountains. They used to be known as Sungaksan, but are now known as Pukhansan. They figured they should investigate the valley where the fortress used to be. Nellie stays with Saladin in the car. Using the map overlay they found, they hike the mountain to find the location marker on said map. After a romantic race with Ian, where Amy says he is also a Cahill, confirming that he is family, they stumble upon the location they were searching for. Natalie finds a statue of Hideyoshi, and Dan figured out that Toota actually is a clue about the Philosopher's Stone. They slide the coin into the statue's mouth. The ground rumbles, and Ian tackles Amy out of the way and stares romantically at her.
Ew!
When the dust clears, an opening into Hideyoshi's hiding place is revealed. Our characters venture inside together into the darkness. They are greeted by a rotting, sulfuric smell. Inside, Amy is startled out of her thoughts of Ian by a colony of bats flying about. She also gives Ian back the coin, feeling he has earned her trust. Finally, Dan calls after Amy to bring the lantern light closer. They've stumbled upon Hideyoshi's treasure, all the loot he plundered after conquering Japan and heading to Korea. A lot of it is gold, as Hideyoshi liked gold, rumors saying he ingested it and even worshipped it. It is Dan that pieces it all together, figuring out that gold is the clue. And by the elements united is entrance granted, the highest to be revealed. The alchemy coin was the elements united, and the highest element is gold. They then find another clue in the form of a triangular mirror with strange letters around it. Letters Dan had noticed on the swords earlier. Dan figures out, with the help of Natalie, that the letters are mirror images, and he uses that to decode the clue. Dan then tries to see if the letters were an anagram and came to the conclusion of Lake Tash, which he tells the Cabras is in Kyrgyzstan. With that, the Cabras immediately turn around and betray the Cahills. Natalie holds out her usual dart gun as her and Ian back away slowly, closing the cave entrance as they do so. As they search for a way to escape, Dan mentions that the clue he found was not Lake Tash. It's a diversion to throw off the Cabras in case they betrayed him. Dan, thinking ahead for once, you'll love to see it. Alistair reassures them that the rock around them is made of schist, a type of very dense and hard rock. They're able to cause an explosion and are then free to climb out. But as they do so, the rumbling continues as the entire structure begins to collapse with Alistair still inside. Dan and Amy are calling out for him, but only Dan hears his final words. It's not schist. So Alistair lied to protect them from the truth, that it was a calculated risk he took to keep his promise and protect Dan and Amy. As Dan and Amy were talking to police, they see that Bai-O shows up, and behind him, they see the man in black. They hide as he surveys the area of destruction. They meet Nellie and Saladin and Mr. Chung back at the car. Mr. Chung is the driver, and drive back home. There, Dan tells them how he decoded the clue as Al-Kahest, an alchemy word for the Philosopher's Stone. Amy points out how can it be a clue if it's not a real thing. She then has an idea. She writes out Al-Saket. She tells Nellie and Dan how she did a unit in school on Egypt. Al means of, and Saket is an Egyptian goddess. Amy asks Nellie if they have enough money to get to Egypt. Nellie tells them how the Cabras had never came to collect their stuff when they betrayed Amy and Dan, which means she still has the money they gave her. Dan, too sad to focus, wanders into Alistair's room, reminiscing over the things in his room, like the dirty white gloves on the counter, which Dan notices is caked in dirt and charcoal. He calls for Amy and tells her how Uncle Alistair is alive and had ditched them again. They were double-crossed by their uncle again. In the epilogue, Alistair pays a visit to his uncle Bai threatening him before leaving. That's where we leave our characters. Amy and Dan have found the third clue of gold, but so have the Cabrals and Alistair. At least they're going in the right direction, with their next destination being Egypt. Things seem to be turning around for our heroes, or maybe they're just getting used to the antics of being a Cahill. Join me in the next video when we recount the fourth book, Beyond the Grave. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts below, and to subscribe to my channel. See you in the next one.